Hey everyone, Sparrow here. Thank you for joining me at True North Sanctuary once more, or for the first time if this is your first visit to my channel, welcome. Today we are building aviaries for admittedly building piece birds, but those building piece birds are the only birds we have, so we'll take it. Especially since these models were made over countless hours by some amazing creators who were kind enough to share them with all of us on the Steam workshop. I'll make sure to add the packs I used to the blueprint collections linked below. So first off, I would love to thank everyone who gave me suggestions about which birds to include in this zoo. I got a bunch of comments and there's no way I could fit all of those birds in, so I had to be pretty picky. Ultimately, the choices came down to what was available on the workshop. For example, I did really want to include woodpeckers, as they're some of my favorite birds, and I believe also my zodiac sign in the North American indigenous zodiac, but I unfortunately couldn't find any models on the workshop, and recoloring an existing bird of a similar size is something I began an attempt on, but quickly gave up on. If someone wants to do it for me, let me know, and I may still be able to find room for them in TNS. But although we won't have woodpeckers today, we will be welcoming 9 different species of birds to the sanctuary, and they are the common raven, the blue jay, the northern cardinal, the great horned owl, the snowy owl, the whooping crane, the mallard duck, the American white pelican, and of course the Canadian goose. All of these birds are significant to Alberta or Canada in some way, and I'll have a few fun facts for each one throughout today's video. Which, thank you to one of my commenters for reminding me how much I love learning about animals and sharing that knowledge with you all. With how busy the last few weeks have been and the unscripted videos, I haven't really been doing that, and I think that's a big part of my channel, something I love doing. So yes, we are back to the scripted videos, because apparently all of that goes out the window when it's unscripted and the content is potentially not as engaging and not what you want to see or hear. But do let me know what your favorite part of my videos is in the comments below. It really helps me see what the community wants and how I can improve in future videos. Speaking of, if you have ventured over to my community tab in the last week, you may have seen the poll about what you love seeing most in speed builds, and most of you said building exteriors, which I found pretty interesting. Building interiors came in second, and rocks and foliage work quite a bit behind that in third place. This video won't be dealing with interiors too much. For that, I recommend the Boreal Cafe if you haven't seen it already, but we will be setting up a few buildings and doing a lot of rock and foliage work. If that's not something you're interested in, I totally understand. See you in the next one, where we will be building a building. So that should satisfy the building exterior crowd. This building before you will house the common raven, the blue jay, and the northern cardinal. I settled for a more rustic look using the Twilight Pack door panels and our trusty mesh pieces. The holes in the roof will be filled with mesh as well to provide some natural light and make the enclosures feel slightly more open and airy. Each species of bird will also have a small backstage area. I haven't decorated the interiors too much yet, but those will be done before the end of the zoo, which is coming up a lot more quickly than I think anyone would like. Kind of bittersweet. For now, as I continue building the aviary, let's talk about the feathered friends that will call this building their home. The common raven lives in a variety of habitats and climates, anywhere from the desert to coastal cliffs to boreal forest to Arctic tundra. It is an incredibly diverse bird and an opportunist, which means it takes advantage of temporary food sources such as kills made by large carnivores. Perhaps because of this reliance on predators, ravens have been observed to hold a special relationship with wolves, even going so far as to play tug-of-war with wolf pups. Some biologists theorize that individual ravens might have bonds to specific wolves within a pack throughout their lives, which is super cool. Makes me want my own personal raven buddy. Ravens are some of the most intelligent birds out there, with adults rivaling the cognitive skills of adult apes. These amazing birds will be receiving the largest enclosure in this aviary complex. Here I am building a hatch for them, but that is mostly due to their large size compared to the blue jay and northern cardinal. The smaller birds are going to be next-door neighbors. The blue jay is also a very intelligent bird with complex social systems and tight family bonds. One of its main features is the crest on its head, which will raise and lower depending on the bird's mood, so if it's excited or aggressive, the crest feathers will be raised. They also love acorns apparently, and are credited with helping spread oak trees. Blue jays, I also learned, actually have brown feathers. The fact that they appear blue is due to the structure of their feathers, which refract blue light but absorb other wavelengths, making them appear blue. So if you backlit a blue jay feather, it would actually appear brown, not blue. The northern cardinal, in contrast, is bright red, but only the males. The female cardinal is brown to help her hide from predators when nesting. The red of the male cardinal can be more or less bright depending on how many berries they've eaten. The red color comes from carotenoid pigments, which are found in red fruits. So the more scarlet berries a male cardinal eats, especially during molting, the brighter his feathers will be. In addition to their striking appearance, cardinals are also some of the most vocal songbirds, with about 24 different songs. And just like that, this aviary is wrapping up. On to the next. This aviary will be the home of the great horned owl, Alberta's provincial bird. The structure itself was built using the same method as the mountainside aviary, so do check that video out if you haven't already. This is a tight space, so I do apologize for the camera clipping. It was really hard to get in here and set everything up. I wanted this aviary to be a little more covered with foliage since great horned owls live primarily in forested areas. My fiance's parents actually had a pair nesting just outside of their backyard this summer, and we got to watch the babies from afar. The next aviary is the snowy owl aviary, and it is right across from the Arctic foxes. The structure of this one was built the same way as the Arctic fox habitat if you're interested in seeing how that came together. A little more sparse in this habitat, as snowy owls generally live in tundra environments, but they have also been spotted in boreal forests, so try to keep the foliage more coniferous. They do generally prefer open fields and marshes though. Snowy owls and great horned owls are about the same size but have a few distinguishing features. While great horned owls are brown and have tufts on their heads, snowy owls are white with black markings. Female owls have more markings, while male owls are usually close to pure white. In this enclosure, I also played around with enrichment items, just opened up the habitat tab and wondered what a snowy owl might enjoy. Ended up going with the mirror mobile and sprinkler. The largest aviary goes to the whooping cranes. Seriously, it's just over 1,000 meters squared. It is an open aviary, which means that the sanctuary likely clips the wings of the birds or only takes in birds that for one reason or another can't fly. It's a little off the main path, okay, a lot, but this was one bird I hadn't even considered until someone mentioned it in the comments, and they were totally right. The whooping crane is an absolutely iconic bird, especially in Alberta. It is designated as an endangered animal under the Alberta Wildlife Act and has been an at-risk species since 1991. There is only one self-sustaining flock of whooping cranes left in Alberta. There are about 180 of them living in Wood Buffalo National Park, which is along the border between Alberta and the Northwest Territories. Whooping cranes generally nest in wetlands or marshes, and the disappearance of these nesting grounds is the biggest contributor to their endangerment. So, as you can see, I created a marsh-like habitat for them. If you're wondering why the blue rectangles when I was terraforming, it's a trick I picked up from, I can't recall the YouTuber at the moment, but what you do is create a flat layer using the plastic rectangle piece and set it to the height of the water. Then when you delete the water, you can terraform the water feature while still having an idea of where the water will go. Great placeholder and came in very handy during this build. I repurposed the walls from the Raven Blue Jay Cardinal aviary, so won't go into details there, but this walkway up is something different that I haven't really done before. I generally don't have raised backstage areas, but here I felt it worked. You may hear my cat playing with something in the background. I do apologize. When you stand in front of the reindeer habitat, you can just see a tiny part of this building, and I really like that because it makes you curious, makes you want to see what's over there and venture further into the zoo. So that's the reason why this building is slightly raised. This is another enrichment item from the Habitat tab. I thought a little water feature would work well for the whooping cranes. We're not going to spend too much time here, just adding some rapids effects to make it look like the water is spilling over into the pond. Then the rest is more rocks and foliage, which is very similar to the foliage work you saw at the beginning with the raven enclosure, so we're going to skip ahead to the almost finished product. Finally, the final, not quite aviary. Last week I asked for your guesses as to what is going in this big space here, and there were some awesome guesses. One person got really close with a hockey rink, which I guess this water feature could turn into in the winter. That would be a pretty fun way to repurpose it. But it is actually going to be a pond that the sanctuary maintains for the birds that fly through the area, including mallard ducks, white pelicans, and Canadian geese. The pelicans may be a bit of a stretch, but I have personally seen pelicans over in Elk Island Park, and they are just stunning, so I had to have them in TNS in some capacity. As always, terrain work and pathing first to make sure everything is working before getting into the details. I played around with this path for far too long, only to later cover it up with a concrete plaza because it wasn't working the way I wanted it to. Big surprise. So on the bright side, at least this area calls for flat terrain, because otherwise that wouldn't have been possible. I'll have to really think about the design of the next section to make sure the pathing works the way I want it to. Probably won't, but it is what it is. It is mostly planned, but just like a general overview rather than the details, I need to buckle down and get that done before the next video. I've had a lot of speculation about what the final animals will be, and all of them have been guessed at one point or another, so I'm excited to bring those habitats to life in the near future. With a new DLC coming out before the end of the year, I'm also kind of hoping for some new North American animals, even though that will mean finding room for them in this zoo. I'm sure it's doable. I'm not going to worry about it too much at the moment, but there is the potential for additional TNS episodes depending on the content of the new pack. I've heard a lot of rumors or guesses about mountains or highlands, and I hope there would be some Canadian animals in that, but we will just have to wait and see. Seems like I'm always talking about new DLC during aviary videos specifically, so let's not do too much of that this time and focus on the build. I tried something a bit different this time. Normally I'll do all of the rock work by placing individual rocks, but this time I really wanted to streamline that process. So I just built part of a wall and then copied that around the pond here before going back and filling in any gaps or adding some individual rocks to make sure the backdrop doesn't look the same all around. Highly recommend this method. I don't know why I haven't used it before. If you follow my posts on Twitter or the community tab on YouTube, you may have seen a screenshot of these rocks going in already. We're throwing caution to the wind. I know the file is lagging pretty hard, but here we are adding more rocks all over the place. While that happens, here are some fun facts about the birds that might stop here. The mallard duck is one of my favorite birds. I love the green that the males have on their heads, one of my favorite colors. These ducks also lay eggs that are a light green color, which is quite different from other ducks around the world. The quacking that you might associate with the mallard duck is actually a sound only the female makes. Drakes or males make a much quieter sound. I'm just going to pause the animal facts for a second here to say that the inspiration for this fence came from a speed build by Digital Blob that I watched recently. It was their first YouTube video and super well done, and obviously inspirational since I'm making a pretty similar fence here. Anyway, in contrast to mallard ducks, one of the louder birds out there is the Canadian goose, colloquially known as the cobra chicken. They are the largest goose in the world and probably one of the most dangerous, hence their nickname. Especially during hatching season, these guys are known to chase off predators while honking and hissing, and being chased by a goose is kind of terrifying. Ask me how I know. They are only around for about half the year as they migrate to warmer climates every winter, easily traveling 2,400 kilometers or 1,500 miles in a day if weather permits. These migrating groups fly in a V formation where the front bird breaks the headwind to make flight easier for the other birds. They shift positions once in a while to make sure no bird gets too tired. Also interesting to know, the Canadian goose nearly became extinct in the early 1900s, so it's great that we have so many of them today, even if they can be a little bit scary. Our last bird, the American white pelican, is one of the largest North American birds and has an average wingspan second only to the California condor, measuring in at about 9 feet, which is quite impressive. They are also one of the heaviest flying birds in the world, weighing in at between 7 to 20 pounds on average, which is no surprise as the parents provide roughly 150 pounds of food to their chick from its birth to the time it's ready to go on its own. That's a lot of fish, which is their primary food source. Pelicans will cooperate when feeding by coordinating their swimming to drive fish into the shallows, where they can be easily scooped up in their large bills. They are quite the sight to behold, one of my favorites when bird watching. Final touches include lining the path edges with more rocks and planting up any dead spaces, but you will just be seeing the finished product of most of that in the tour, which is starting in 3, 2, 1. And there we go. We are starting right next to the Beaver Lodge over here, and above us on this path is the land bridge for the Arctic wolves, but we are going to be headed over to our brand new aviary right over here. So these animals obviously don't move because they're made of building pieces, but that's totally okay. So here we have the common raven. We have one of them perching on this feeding tray over here, and then another one on that little birdhouse all the way back there. Super simple. I'm thinking maybe a little bit more foliage to cover up that back wall, but for the most part, pretty happy with how that aviary turned out. Inside the buildings, we don't really have much just yet. Here we have some blue jays, but in terms of staff facilities, so tools, I don't know, random things, supplies they would need to do their job, not quite there yet. But here we have some blue jays, and over here we have some cardinals. So cute, so bright. I just realized all of them are males because they're all red, but that's okay. Those little doorways going into the backstage area are from an aviary prop pack by Jaguar X, and that will be in the collection of items linked in the description. We are also doing this tour paused just to make sure that the lag is not as bad as it would be otherwise. Some more signage directing us around the zoo. And we're going to make our way past the Boreal Cafe over to the Great Horned Owl Aviary. We'll make a pit stop at this pond afterwards, but for now, since we are walking past it, there is a water filtration system over here that helps the zoo maintain this pond, but we aren't super interested in that right now. We are interested in our great horned owls right there. So as I said during the speed build, this one is a little bit more forested because they like living in forested areas. So a little bit harder to spot them, but I think that's part of the fun. There's one right there as well. There are only 2, so we have found both of them, which doesn't really happen at zoos a lot of the time. We're going to take the top path over here for now, and then I think we might end off our tour on the bottom path. So over here is where we will be expanding the rest of the zoo. But if we look down into our pond, we can see some pelicans, there are some geese, and then we also some ducks, and obviously a great view of the Boreal Cafe from here as well. This fence up here is just modified from the fence on the other side of the pond. I removed the hedge and the concrete wall, and then added an anchor plate at the bottom plus the planter in front of it. These pedestals on the ends, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to put there yet. Maybe statues, but potentially also just have them empty, and then in the winter they could have something fun like ice sculptures on them. So I guess we'll see. We can get up close to some of these nesting mallards over here. And up this way, we are going to take a look at our snowy owl aviary. A little bit more foliage than I initially thought it would have, but there the dead trees do work quite well in here. So we have our male, which is fully white, and then we have our female admiring herself in the mirror mobile over here. Should be able to get a slightly better look at her from this angle here. Very, very cute. And then as we find our way down this path, we are slowly going to see some of the whooping cranes. So we can actually see one just over here. Yeah, right there. And there are quite a few of them in here. I think I ended up placing 6 or 7 of them. So they have a massive habitat. There is more than enough room for that many. I hope they are happy here, even though they are made of building pieces. There is one nesting in here as well. But there should be more around the back here when it comes to the pool. Right there, a sight to behold. Still lots of work to do with the extra vegetation. Some of the trees are floating a little bit, but we'll get to that before the end of the zoo. And honestly, even if there are a few floating trees, who cares? There are just so many things to think about when building these zoos. Here is probably the prime spot because we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. And that's basically it. I did also make a little picnic area off to the side here to fill in this gap between this aviary and that aviary. I thought the guests would probably want a little pit stop along the way. I have also realized that I have hardly any bathrooms in this zoo, so it wouldn't work too well as a franchise because your guests would not be happy. But perhaps we will remedy that in the next episode. We're just going to take one final look at our pond from the bottom path. Other than those construction walls in the background, it does look quite nice. A nice spot to sit down and have some lunch while you look at some of the geese and ducks and hope they don't try to come and steal your food. And that would be all for today. I hope you enjoyed this aviary compilation. Once again, please let me know in the comments what your favorite part of my videos is so that I can keep making the content that you love to see. Hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already, all of those fun things. And I will see you next time. Bye.